Welcome. My name is Dr. Victor Manalo. I am a macro social worker, and I am the macro social work mentor. Welcome to my first episode of this podcast. I'm so excited that you're here. So this is the first episode, and it's going to be basically an introduction to this podcast. So I'll start off by telling you why I wanted to start this podcast. Well, I've been teaching social work at California State University, Los Angeles, since about 1999. So I've had a good number of years of teaching. And I have taught in my career, the vast majority of classes that I've taught have been policy classes, community organizing, social work administration. I've also taught some research and other policy classes. But they've been primarily macro classes. And I know the look that I get from social work students when I come in on the first day of class and tell them what we're going to be covering, whether it's policy or community organizing or the administration of social service agencies. I see that look in their eyes. Some of them kind of roll their eyes. Some of them are like, I can't believe I'm here taking this class. What does this have to do with social work? So I've had to deal with that all of my academic career. And I kind of saw it as a challenge, to tell you the truth. So in the first probably 2/3 of my career in teaching, I really saw it as like my trying to convince students of the value of all of macro practice, whether it was in policy or organizing or in the administration of social service agencies. But over the past few years, what I've noticed is an uptick in the number of students who are really interested in macro level practice, both across my graduate classes and my undergraduate classes. They really wanted to learn more about the mezzo macro space. And I really think that has to do with what we've all experienced over the past few years. The killing and murder of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, the movement for police accountability, and defunding the police, as well as movements within social work to abolish child welfare systems, and also the pandemic, I think, has really thrown us all for a loop to kind of rethink the way that things are. And students are much more in tune with the need for us as social workers to promote and to fight for social justice. And many of my students at Cal State LA, they're the first in their school, in their families to get an education. And many of them, they all have the lived experience of discrimination, prejudice, of the unequal and inequitable outcomes of many of our institutions, and the lack of investment and resources and funding in their communities and their schools. So they know what it's like to be on the short end of the stick when it comes to justice in this country. And I think more and more students want to be a part of it. So I'm hoping that's why you're here, because you want to learn more about how to get involved as a macro social worker and to incorporate that into your practice. Secondly, I'm the president of the California chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. And we, as social workers, have an image problem. And I know that all of you who are listening to this know that. And you've all experienced it because all of you have been in that situation where you have had to introduce yourself to somebody as a social worker, and then comes the awkward conversation and moments that follow thereafter. That is our image problem as social workers. So I really want to use this podcast to help empower us and also to raise the awareness, the visibility, and the importance of what we do as social workers in general, but also as social workers through incorporating macro social work and mezzo social work into our practice, that we can use this to really fight for and promote social justice, and use it ultimately, use this to be able to dismantle and reimagine the very same institutions that we work in as social workers, and institutions in our communities, in our cities, in our country, those institutions that support the status quo. Because we all know that the status quo needs to change. I also want you to know, if you're here, perhaps you're a student, or perhaps you're a practitioner who's really interested in macro practice, but you don't know how to get there. Well, I'm hoping that this podcast will show you that there is a pathway to macro practice. But it's not going to be a pathway that's going to be shown to you by anyone in any university or anyone in your agencies. Every macro practice social worker that I've talked to over the past 3 or 4 years have told me the same thing. We all had to blaze our own path. So if you're going to follow this path, you're going to have to blaze the path for others. So I'm hoping that through this podcast, I'm able to kind of blaze a little bit of a path for some of you to get into macro practice. And the final reason why I wanted to start this podcast is, frankly, my wife and my daughter suggested I start a podcast. So with their encouragement and support, I'm starting my podcast. So thanks for being here. So this year, 2023, I'm recording this in March of 2023. March, as you all know, is Social Work Month, Professional Social Work Month. So happy Social Work Month to all of you. I'm kicking off this intentionally during Social Work Month. But this year marks my 30th year since I made the decision as a graduate student to focus on macro level practice. And it took me 30 years to get to where I am today, to actually have experience, to have stories, to have lessons that I can share with you in this podcast. So over those 30 years, I've spent over 20 years involved and engaged in local government, that is in city level government or municipal government. I was an elected council member and mayor in my city from 2007 to 2018, and I think that's probably what most social workers want to hear about in terms of my experience, and I guess it's kind of my claim to fame in social work circles that I was an elected official. And it was here in my city, where I live now, in the city of Artesia, California, which is about 16 miles southeast of downtown Los Angeles, and about 10 miles or so, I think, northeast of downtown Long Beach. So we're a small city of about 17,000 people, nestled in between these two large cities of Long Beach and Los Angeles. But I also served in the city as a planning commissioner before I became an elected official. And after I lost my re-election in 2018, I went back to the Planning Commission. I was appointed, and I'm to be on the Planning Commission, and I am currently the chair of the Artesia Planning Commission. I have 30 years as a leader in the National Association of Social Workers, NASW, and I've been a member for that long. But I've been an active member. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm the president of the California Chapter Board of Directors and currently the chair of the Council of Chapter Presidents Steering Committee. The Council of Chapter Presidents includes all 55 presidents of NASW. I had a lot of experience in delegate assembly. Also, I was a former national board representative, And I also serve right now on a strategic planning committee with the president-elect, Yvonne Chase of NASW. Was on the CEO search that brought in Dr. Estreet as our new CEO. And I'm on search committee right now because we're looking for an executive director for our California chapter. And shout out to the predecessor, Deborah Sun, my good friend and colleague and BFF social worker. I hope that she's doing well. So beyond that, I also have experience as a member of a board of directors for different nonprofit agencies in the area. And so all of this experience has left me, hasn't left me, but I worked for it, an extensive network of contacts throughout Los Angeles County, throughout California, and as a matter of fact, throughout the country, with social workers, contacts with elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels, with staff members and government officials all over. So I'm very, very proud of that I have that extensive network. And all of these things I will talk about in subsequent podcasts as to why, what I've learned from all of these years of experience that I've had in communities, starting programs in communities, bringing people together through my contacts, and in governance as an elected official, as being on a board of directors. I think the most important thing that I bring to this podcast is the fact that I'm a university professor. And even though many of us, including myself, haven't had the best experiences in our classrooms with university professors, I have to tell you that when I was elected to the Artesia City Council in 2007, I went into that when I started on the council. I was finally elected. Took me 3 tries, and on the 3rd try I finally got it. But that's for a future podcast. I'll tell you about that. But I went into that council position with the mindset of a university professor, in that city council was, for me, it was, and for many people here in Los Angeles County and in many cities, it's a part-time job. So I'm going to use this part, just as an aside, I'm going to use this podcast as well to dispel the myths that many of us have and misconceptions that many of us have about politics and government. So here's the first myth. City council members make a lot of money and they get paid well for a full-time job. Incorrect. Some cities have full-time city councils, and some cities have full-time city councils that get paid very well. For example, in the city of Los Angeles, a city council member makes close to $250,000 a year. Now, that's a decent pay for a very difficult job to be a city council person. In my city of Artesia, just 17,000 residents, I got paid $500 a month. I figured I probably worked in a busy month 40 hours a week, 40 hours a month. So that turns out to be a little more than $10 an hour that I worked on the Artesia City Council. That's why I got paid for, right? That was my stipend, $500 a month. So I still had to work. I still had to work at my full-time job as a university professor. So when I went onto the Artesia City Council, I thought, okay, I need to learn as much as I can about being a council member so that I can take this experience and this learning and I can bring it directly into my classroom, right? Directly into my classroom. And that's what I did. I was on the council for almost 12 years, and I continue to be involved, not just with the people that I've met over the years who are still on city councils, but I want to use all of that experience